Helen was 58 years old. She worked as a cleaner in a small city hospital. Every morning, she woke up before the sun. She put on her old uniform, tied her hair, and walked to the hospital with slow but steady steps. The work was not easy. She cleaned the long hallways, empty waiting rooms, and cold hospital floors. Sometimes she carried heavy buckets of water. Sometimes she bent down until her back hurt. Most people did not notice her. They passed by quickly, busy with their own lives. But Helen never complained. She believed that even small jobs had value. She always said to herself, "If I can make this place clean, maybe someone will feel a little better today." After many hours of work, she often sat in the staff room for a short break. Her favorite thing was a simple cup of tea. The warm drink gave her comfort, almost like a friend sitting beside her. Helen had no husband anymore. He had died many years ago. Her only daughter lived far away in another city. Letters and phone calls were rare. Most days, Helen felt alone, but she tried to stay strong. One afternoon, while pushing her cart of cleaning tools, Helen passed by room 12. She heard a weak cough inside. Out of curiosity, she stopped for a moment. Through the open door, she saw a young man lying in bed, his face pale and tired. He looked about 20 years old. There were no flowers, no visitors, no smiles in his room. Helen looked at him for a few seconds. Something touched her heart. She whispered softly to herself, "Poor boy, he must be so lonely." She pushed her cart again and walked away. But that night, while making her tea at home, she could not stop thinking about the young man in room 12. The next day, Helen arrived at the hospital as usual. She carried her mop, her broom, and her old cart. But this time, her mind was not only on the floors and the walls. She was thinking of room 12. When she passed by the room again, the door was half open. The young man was awake, staring at the ceiling with tired eyes. Helen hesitated for a moment. Then she knocked gently on the door frame. "Good morning," she said softly. The young man turned his head. His eyes were gray, almost the color of winter skies. "Good morning," he answered with a weak smile. Helen stepped inside. "I hope I'm not disturbing you. I just wanted to check if you need anything." He shook his head slowly. "No visitors, no friends, only nurses sometimes. It feels empty." Helen felt a sudden pain in her heart. She looked at the small table beside his bed. It was empty. No flowers, no books, no fruit, nothing to show care. "What's your name?" Helen asked kindly. "Mark," he said. "And you?" "My name is Helen. I work here. I usually clean, not talk, but maybe talking is also important." For the first time, Mark smiled a little wider. It was a fragile smile, but real. Helen looked at him for a while and then said, "Do you like tea?" His eyes brightened a little. "Tea? Yes, I love tea, but nobody brings it to me." Helen nodded slowly. "Tomorrow I will bring you a cup of tea, a real one, not hospital tea, but homemade." Mark stared at her in surprise. "Really? You would do that?" "Yes," Helen answered firmly. "Everyone deserves a warm cup of tea." When Helen left the room, her heart felt lighter. For the first time in many years, she was not only cleaning rooms, she was opening a door to something else, maybe friendship. The next morning, before leaving for work, Helen prepared a small thermos of tea. She added a little sugar and a slice of lemon, just the way she liked it. She also put 2 cups in her bag. When she arrived at the hospital, she finished her usual cleaning quickly. Her heart was beating faster than normal as she walked toward room 12. Mark was awake, sitting up a little against his pillows. He looked tired, but less pale than the day before. When he saw Helen, his eyes grew brighter. "Good morning, Mark," Helen said with a smile. As promised, she lifted the thermos. "You really brought it," Mark whispered in surprise. "I thought maybe you would forget." Helen laughed gently. "I never forget tea." She poured the warm liquid into the 2 small cups. The smell filled the room, soft and comforting. Helen gave 1 cup to Mark and kept the other for herself. Mark held the cup carefully, almost as if it was something precious. "This is the first real tea I've had in weeks," he said. "Thank you." They sipped the tea together in silence for a few moments. The room, usually cold and lonely, now felt different, warmer, almost like home. Then Mark asked, "Do you always drink tea at this time?" "Yes," Helen nodded. "It's my little ritual. Tea makes me feel calm, and now I can share it with you." Mark smiled softly. "I think this is the best moment I've had since I came here." And from that day on, Helen visited Mark every afternoon with tea. Sometimes they spoke about small things, weather, books, or memories from childhood. Sometimes they just sat together, saying nothing, but feeling less alone. Days turned into weeks. The bond between them grew stronger, like the taste of tea that stayed warm even after the cup was empty. But one evening, when Helen was about to leave, Mark looked at her with serious eyes. His voice was quiet, almost broken. "Helen, there is something I need to tell you." Helen sat back down on the chair beside Mark's bed. She placed her hands on her lap and looked at him carefully. His face was pale, and his eyes seemed heavier than usual. "What is it, Mark?" she asked softly. Mark took a slow breath. "The doctors, they told me the truth last week. My illness is not getting better. The treatments are not working. I don't have much time left." Helen froze. Her cup of tea grew cold in her hands. "Oh, Mark," she whispered. She wanted to say more, but her throat felt tight. Mark looked down. "I'm only 20 years old. I thought I had a future. I thought I would travel, study, maybe start a family. But now, it feels like everything is ending before it really began." Helen reached out and touched his hand gently. "You are not alone," she said. "I will be here with you, every day, until the very end." Tears filled Mark's eyes. "Why are you so kind to me? You don't even know me." Helen smiled sadly. "Because I know what loneliness feels like. I lost my husband years ago. My daughter lives far away. I drink tea alone most nights. But now I drink tea with you, and that makes my life brighter." Mark squeezed her hand weakly. "Then maybe we both needed each other. You gave me something the doctors could not. Peace." Helen's eyes burned with tears, but she kept her voice steady. Mark, no matter how many days you have left, you are not forgotten. You matter, and I will remind you of that with every cup of tea." Mark closed his eyes, but a small smile stayed on his face. For the first time, he looked calm. That night, as Helen walked home, the city streets felt quieter than usual. She carried the empty thermos in her bag, but her heart was heavy. She knew the time with Mark was short, yet she also knew their friendship was real. The days passed quietly. Every afternoon, Helen brought tea to room 12. Sometimes Mark was strong enough to talk. Other times he was too weak, but he always smiled when he saw her. One rainy evening, Helen arrived with her thermos as usual. The nurse outside the room looked at her with soft, sad eyes. Helen understood before the words were spoken. She walked in slowly. Mark was lying peacefully, his face calm, his hands resting on the blanket. The cup from yesterday still stood on the table, a few drops of tea left inside. Helen sat down beside him. She touched his hand gently, though it was already cold. Tears filled her eyes, but she whispered with a steady voice, "Goodbye, my friend. Thank you for sharing tea with me. Thank you for reminding me that kindness still matters." For a long moment she sat in silence. The sound of the rain against the window was the only answer. Later that night, Helen went home. She made herself a cup of tea, as always. She placed one extra cup on the table, empty but waiting. She closed her eyes and imagined Mark smiling across from her. From that day on, Helen never drank tea alone. In her heart, she carried Mark's memory. Each sip reminded her that even the smallest gestures, like a warm drink shared with a lonely soul, could change a life. And in a way, Mark had given her something too. He had turned her loneliness into love. If you liked this story, please like, comment, share, and subscribe.